Hey there, friends. Nate Birt here at Silver Maple Strategies. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. I am Nate, and in just a moment, we will get started. I'm going to give people a couple of minutes to get dialed in, and then we will begin momentarily. Again, thank you for being here. We will get started with our year-end reset here in just a minute. Hey, Nate, again, if you are just joining us, thank you for being here. I've dropped a quick note in the chat if you want to participate. I'm asking, where are you coming from in the world? What organization are you representing today? And then what is the temperature outside where you're at? I think here in Missouri, it's going to get to like, I don't know, low 20s today with snow on the ground. And I am already ready for summer, and it's not even quite officially winter yet. So let us know where you're at, who you're with, and what temperature is today, and then we'll dive in here in just a moment. Kevin, great to see you. Oh, 57. That sounds fantastic. I'm moving to Silicon Valley. Jim, Salem, Kentucky. Love it. Awesome. Always love to see the Southeast represented. Yeah, I will. Kevin, I will come visit. Thank you. And Haley from San Angelo, Texas. Haley, thanks for being here today. Awesome. 78. Man, that sounds balmy. That sounds amazing. Uh, Kevin, you're right. I've got to follow through on my promises. I can't just make them. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here and for participating in the chat, whether you are with us live today or are watching this on a replay. So today's format is a little bit different. I'm going to keep very little to say about myself or about Silver Maple Strategies up front. It is going to be about 30 minutes, so we may go slightly over that, but I'm going to try to keep this as brief and to the point as possible, and we will see if this can benefit everyone. Oh, Haley, 48 is still pretty warm, so thanks for the clarification there. That's awesome. So today we really want to focus on this idea of the year-end reset, reflect, reimagine, and reignite your nonprofit's purpose for 2026. I have always found it helpful in my career, no matter the organization I was working with, whether I was in the corporate world or now in my own business, um, thinking about where we've come from and then using that as a launch pad for future growth and impact has always been really helpful to me, and I hope it can be helpful to all of you today. So, in the first part of our conversation, I'm going to lead you through some guided journal prompts. Now, I'm going to actually ask you to participate here in real time. You may not get everything out on paper or on the computer screen that you would like, but at least you can get started. I will also say that for anyone who signed up for today's session, I will follow up yet this week or early next with a copy of these slides and these questions. So if it's more helpful for you to just follow along with the questions, maybe jot them down, and then you can refer back to that later, that would be fine too, right? But as much as possible, I want you to participate and really give this some thought and really go with your gut, right? Don't overthink this because oftentimes your intuition is far better at sort of giving a gut check, so to speak, than just sort of pontificating and really overthinking things. Again, you can go as deep on these as you want, but I think your gut reaction to these questions will be very telling and maybe give you some clarity heading into the new year. Okay. Then in the back half, in the last few minutes of our call today, I'll walk you through some trends that we're seeing and give you some resources with clickable links, citations. You can go and dig deeper. I know a lot of folks are focused on things like fundraising, diversification, like what are the sources of revenue for our nonprofit. Um, how is the donor landscape changing in terms of demographics? Like, what should we be paying attention to? So we'll share some of that as well. And then last but not least, I have a quick survey at the end. If you have time to stick around and just give me feedback on things that were helpful, things you'd like to see differently in the future, that would be great. And then I'll also give you a quick preview, if I can find my documentation here, of some of our upcoming sessions in the new year for these webinars. All right, with that, let's dive into the material. Given you that already. So whenever we have a conversation with someone in the nonprofit world or with a client, we always like to begin with our resilience leadership model. So the resilience leadership model is the way we talk about how nonprofits strengthen their ability to thrive no matter what's happening in the outside world. And the way we describe resilience here at Silver Maple Strategies is that it really boils down to three core pillars. The first is morale, right? How are we feeling? Are we feeling progress? Do we have a sense of hope? Or are we disillusioned, right? Are we discouraged? Are we so in the weeds of the work and so frustrated by the funding environment that we're really losing steam and we're really unable to feel that we're making an impact? The second core pillar of resilience is clarity. So, are we internally aligned on our goals, our objectives, our vision for the organization, how we show up and make change in the world? Or are we sort of all over the map and maybe we need to get more alignment? This also affects your ability to be clear externally. So, how are we talking about the work, the mission, the vision, the impact that we're having? What are the kinds of stories we're telling? And in some cases, there's ambiguity there, right? Maybe some of your message is clear, but not all of it. Or funders are unsure where to fit you in, or like how to peg you. Like, what exactly do you all do relative to all of these other nonprofits that are out there? And so, one of the things we really try to work on is clarifying that message, really getting leaders, executives, decision makers, as well as the clients that you serve, elevating all of their voices so that the work that you're doing is crystal clear and valued and recognized. And then finally, flexibility is the third pillar. What we mean by that is simply having systems in place, whether they are analog, 100% human systems, or whether you're able to leverage technology like artificial intelligence to really help you move faster with greater clarity, with a more strategic lens on everything you do. Such that you are able to thrive as an organization and truly have the space that you need to do the work that you love. All right. So with that in mind, that's sort of the framework around which these questions I'm going to share with you today are designed. And I like to start with a quote which is from Dan Sullivan, author of The Gap and the Gain, a great book, and an author of many other books that I highly recommend. But the quote is, "The way to measure your progress is backward against where you started, not against your ideal." Too often we have this grand vision of, we start the new year fresh. We have all of these big goals. I'm going to, run 1,000 miles. I'm going to visit like 10 different states. I'm going to, fill in the blank, right? Whatever big dreams you have. And those dreams are really important. The problem is that when we sort of set all of these big goals, reality often smacks us in the face, right? And we realize, hey, I had this big goal and it helped me sort of move in that direction. But man, I fell short of the benchmark that I set. And consequently, I feel really bad about myself. Like, why am I such a screw up that I can't make progress? And this is true personally. It's true in our relationships. It's true in an organization like a nonprofit. And so, what I want to encourage you to do today is, again, straight out of the mouth of Dan Sullivan, which is let's think a little bit about measuring ourselves against our past, right? Where did you start the year? I know for many nonprofits that we work with, 2025 was a roller coaster and not in a fun way, right? Not at all in a fun way. And so, but the fact that you all are still here, kicking it, planning for next year, that suggests to me that there is still life in you, right? There's still opportunities that you see on the horizon. And so half of the questions I'm going to share are about comparing yourself to the past and measuring that progress. And then half of the questions are going to be forward facing, like if you were to enter the dream world at the end of 2026, what would that look like? And so we'll walk through those questions together, and then we'll share some trends and some webinar topics toward the end. Okay, so let's dive into the questions. And I'm not a fancy PowerPoint builder, so these questions are going to pop up all together. I apologize for that. Um, I'm sure Audrey on my marketing team is going to want to perhaps we'll have some tips for me to make that better in the future. But at any rate, let's dive into these specific prompts. So I'm going to ask a question and then I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about an answer. Again, you're welcome to think about it in your head, although I think it's really helpful to actually jot it down. Obviously, bonus points if you want to share your thoughts on any of these questions, as little or as much detail as you like about what maybe your response to this question might be. Okay, first question is, as we're looking backward, right, we're comparing where we are today versus where we started a year ago. I want to know what's been your number one area of personal growth in 2025. Again, don't feel any obligation to drop something in the chat. This is for you to think about and reflect on. What has been your best area of personal growth in 2025? So take a minute, think about it, and then we will move on to the next question. All right. Again, I know this is a short session today, so there's likely a lot you're going to want to go deeper on. And again, these are things you can think about while you're walking the dog or you are driving to your holiday parties or whatever the case might be. Um, the next question I want you to consider, again, we're sort of going at starting with me personally, then going to my career in general as a nonprofit leader or a board member or a founder or someone who cares about nonprofits, whatever the case might be for you. And then we're going to go even bigger picture and say about in terms of your organization specifically, where have you grown? So the second question here is, what has been your number one area of career growth in 2025? Again, you can interpret this question broadly however you choose, right? This could be, okay, as I'm looking back over, my time in the nonprofit world, it could be just more broadly, whether you've maybe worked in a combination of for-profits and nonprofits. Again, think about your own professional development. What has been the biggest breakthrough for you in 2025? All right. So hopefully you came up with some things that you've been able, at least one item, maybe more, where you've really grown um, as a leader, as a professional this year. I love Kevin dropping in that he completed his book. I had the privilege of helping and working with Kevin on that project, and it was a real joy to see a new author, in his element and really rocking and rolling. So kudos, Kevin, and love hearing all the great updates about where you're going with your book and the lives that you're touching and the stories that you've been able to capture for all time for the benefit of all of us. That's amazing. All right. Question number three. What has been your nonprofit's number one area of organizational growth in 2025? So I know some of you are leaders within a nonprofit, others of you are board members. So thinking about whatever your organization might be, what is the biggest positive change you've seen within the organization over the past 12 months? So give that some thought, and then we'll dive into the last two look backward questions. All right. So I saw Kevin's note in the chat about financial stability. That might have been on your list, helping your organization get better grounding, especially at a time when so much volatility exists, right? Funding has been pulled back. If we're talking about the federal government, the funding landscape is shifting. Uh, whether you're looking at foundations or individual donors or what have you. So again, change is just part of life. But the fact that you've been able to make progress in this area as an organization is a testament to your commitment, your work ethic, your creativity, your ingenuity. So definitely give yourself credit for that growth within your organization, whatever that growth might look like. Okay, last two questions, and then we're going to start a look forward. Um, what's one type of pain that your organization felt most acutely in 2025? There's all kinds of pain, right? There's like time constraints, there is financial challenges, there might be like interpersonal friction, whether internally or externally. Um, as far as I know, every nonprofit for all time has always had just a perfect relationship between the nonprofit staff and their board. Not, right? Sometimes that doesn't happen. So, whatever the pain has been, I want you to reflect not on like soaking in the pain, but thinking about the pain as a learning experience. So what are three key lessons you can use again and again in the future based on that pain that you have worked through this year? Now, you may still be experiencing some of that pain. Maybe the pain has been alleviated somewhat, but wherever you sit on that spectrum, I want to know what the lessons are. So again, this is for your eyes only, unless you want to share. But what was the pain you felt acutely? And what are three lessons you've learned from working through that pain that you can use again in the future? So give that some thought, and then we'll dive into our last question. All right. So hopefully you've identified at least one, if not three lessons. Pain, struggle is hard, and there's also always a gift. There's always a learning, something that you can take away. So I hope that you were able to find benefit there. Question number five is what's one gift that 2025 has given to your nonprofit? And how can you continue to reap its benefits over the next year? So the gift that I'm thinking of might be something like it has given us clarity, or it's given us resolve, or it has given us a kick in the seat of the pants, whatever the case might be. Um, or maybe it's challenged our belief system and it's forced us to think differently, whatever the case might be. It might be a single word, it might be a phrase. What's one gift it's given you and that you can use again and again in the year ahead? Then we'll move on. Kevin, I love that new leadership supporting your new leader in her vision and ensuring they don't burn out. Yeah, that's a huge one, right? That's definitely a gift when you have fresh eyes and that fresh energy and perspective. And there's also the desire to make sure that you keep the gift of that person, their knowledge, their passion, by keeping them feeling like they're making a difference, like they're not just like, burning the candle at both ends. So that's a great example. I love that. Thank you. All right. So hopefully you've identified one gift that this year, and despite all of its many challenges, has given you. Now let's turn our attention to looking forward, okay? So the first question I have, and these are a little bit longer because I tend to be wordy and I didn't bother to run these through um, Chat GPT. But imagine that it's the end of next year, 2026. It's been an incredible, positive year for your nonprofit. Lots of great things have happened. what has changed? How does the world look? How does it feel and sound in this amazing new version of your organization? So I'm not talking about what does the bank account say? I'm not talking about, we had this many, this many funders knocking at our door. What I'm talking about is like, how does your life, how does the role of the organization change? What does the world look and feel like, right? More of those qualitative attributes. So think about that, and then we'll move on to the next question. All right. So, in thinking about the future, how the world has changed, Kevin in the chat said more community engagement and involvement. I love that. I love the idea that your community could be more involved and engaged in the work of your nonprofit in a year's time. So, that's a great example of like, wow, I'd love to see more faces, more helping hands, more volunteers, whatever the case might be. That's awesome. Okay, next question. Suppose you only had one priority you could invest 100% of your time and energy into your nonprofit in 26. Now, realistically, you all have like 27 different priorities, I suspect, maybe more. But if you had to literally just pick one, if someone said, I'm going to lock you in a room and you can't come out until you pick your one priority for the year because it's like make or break for this organization, what would that priority be and why? So give that some thought, and then we'll move on to the next question. All right. Kevin says, same, our product is very good. Theater productions, but we need more people to know about it and support it. Yeah, I love that. So focusing on community engagement and involvement. Um, yeah, there's a relationship management piece, there's a marketing piece, there's a communications piece. So that all makes total sense. And of course, all of that rolls up into business development, right? Whether that's ticket sales at the theater or, grants coming in the door or what have you. Having that involvement would make such a difference. So I hope each of you was able to come up with an idea as far as your singular priority. Again, the goal of that question is just to start putting some guardrails around how are you going to invest your very precious time, and how's your staff, if you have one, going to invest their time for the best results. So thank you, Kevin. That's a great example. All right. I'm not going to give time to respond to these in depth now, but I wanted to at least share the questions with you for future reference. And then we'll move on to the trends. So, question three, what's one insane goal you would bend space and time to achieve in 2026? And what's at stake? Like, why would that goal be so important to you? So, again, I don't want you to think like hypothetically. I want you to think realistically. Like, if I had a stretch goal, what would it be, right? And why would that be so important? Again, that can be a great conversation starter with your board, with your staff, whatever the case might be. But give that question some thought and really dream big, right? Too many times, I think nonprofits are very humble, which is a great character trait. The flip side or the dark side is that humility means we're not worth $1 million award, or we're not worth doing this big thing that can have these giant repercussions. Like that's just not us. It might be you, it just takes sometimes a mindset shift to say like we know what we're doing. We're delivering really good work. We're helping lots of people. What would be amazing about our organization if we were to really take it to the next level of excellence? Okay. Question number 4. What's one thing that once seemed essential to do that has lost its relevance in your nonprofit and needs to be mercilessly eradicated in order to achieve the greatest impact possible? So again, the idea behind this question is that there may be things, in fact, there are almost assuredly things you're doing now that you shouldn't be doing anymore, right? Or maybe it once made total sense, but the market has changed, or your client base has changed, or the funding landscape has changed. So you need to stop doing it. We often, though, procrastinate because it is very difficult to let go of things that we've invested time and energy into, right? The sunk cost fallacy. What I'm asking you to do here is really get serious about if you're going to have time to achieve these big, insane goals and you're going to make progress and build on this year's learnings, you need space to do that. And that often means cutting something out, not just adding more on top of what you're already doing. Okay. And then finally, question number 5, imagine that you had to pick just one word to motivate and inspire you as a nonprofit leader in 2026. What would that word be and why? So this one for me is a lot of fun because I'm a word person. But I think it is very helpful. And I would suggest this as a word for yourself personally first, rather than just your organization, although you could certainly have both. They might even be the same word. But having a single word that you can repeat to yourself when times get hard, that can motivate you and inspire you, for the year ahead, my personal word of the year is going to be relentless, right? Focusing on really taking action faster, being willing to take risks, calculated risks, and not hesitate, trusting my intuition and insights more than I do today. That's what that means for me. Again, your word and the meaning behind it will be very different. But again, I think it's an exercise that can be super helpful. So give it some thought. I hope these questions today were helpful to you. Okay. With that being said, let's move quickly into the trends, and then I will get you on to your day as promised. So, Pablo Picasso once said, only put off until tomorrow what you are willing to die having left undone. And so, for everyone here, whether you're live or you're watching this as a recording, give yourself a pat on the back because you have made the investment, right? A lot of times we go into meetings, we brainstorm a lot of great ideas, and then they die and they gather dust on the shelf. But by being here today, you're showing, look, this is important to me. It's important to our organization. I've invested in time and really thinking through these questions. I may even invest more time later. And now I'm really getting clear on what are the things I'm willing to put off and what are the things that are so mission critical to me or my career or my nonprofit that I'm going to get even more focused and more determined than ever that we're going to make those things happen. So kudos to you. Okay. Trends to monitor for the new year. So giving is changing, right? I'll go through these really fast, like play by play, and then again, I'll share these slides with you who registered. Look, giving is growing, but often by larger scale donors. And so there's some level of uncertainty around maybe smaller tier donors that could eventually become larger ones, maybe giving at a smaller level. Again, this is a lot of times thinking about individual donors. And so the recommendation from this report from Giving USA was really about how do you start to create pathways for smaller scale donors to your nonprofit to move into a higher tier, right? Because if you already have people giving to you at some level, clearly there is some level of I know you, I like you, I trust you. And so how can you start to paint the vision for them of what might be possible with additional contributions? Nonprofits that I've been associated with in the past have done things like creating a giving circle, right? For example, we're trying to get 100 donors giving at least $1,000 a year so we can achieve these specific goals, right? So if this is something that's relevant for your nonprofit, definitely start thinking about how do we take those already invested donors and moving them to the next level over time. All right. Second trend, donor advised funds where people actually put money, they commit money into a fund, they can never pull it out again, and they can dedicate those to specific types of charitable causes they believe in. That is growing at really fast rates. And so looking for opportunities to really get to know, understand the donor advised fund world. This is something we're learning more about here at Silver Maple Strategies. Getting some of the maybe layers of opacity away so you can really understand who are these donors, why are they wanting to give. Again, you see here there's an opportunity maybe for some more unrestricted dollars that could go toward operations or administration rather than to specific programmatic functions. There's a lot of opportunity here, but it requires you to have a stewardship strategy in place to manage those relationships and look for opportunities to grow the number of people with donor advised funds that can give to your organization. So again, this report can be super helpful if that's something that's appealing to you. Um, Next generation, like, Gen Z, younger generations of donors. This was surprising to me, but maybe not surprising and not surprising, right? So those of you who know me know that I come from the world of climate change, social justice, those kinds of things. Like that's the projects I cut my teeth on in the corporate world. And so it was exciting for me to see that even though, despite whatever changes there may be in other types of funding, there is still an appetite for some of that kind of work. And it's really, it would behoove nonprofits to really strategically think about how do we want to show up in the world. There may be cases where you have to balance or manage your messaging so that you are able to secure federal funding, state level funding. And again, depending on your values, depending on your board direction, there may be the case where you need to, really lean into some of these messages, whether it's around equity or climate or whatever the case might be. Another factor that stood out here was the idea that the more seamless you can make the process of giving your organization money, the better off you're going to be, especially as the donor base gets younger. So, great user experience. It's clear, like, what are the giving options? Again, something that I would throw in is like if there's a way to make that a recurring donation. Again, there are lots of platforms out there, and one of the things we work with our clients on is helping them sort of sort through what are all of the CRMs, the giving platforms that are out there on the web, and helping them make decisions based on their budget, based on the use cases they have in mind, etc. So definitely give these things some attention, both in terms of how you're positioning your organization to attract that next generation of funders without compromising other funding sources, and how can we make the donor experience fantastic. Okay, fourth trend. This will be no surprise to anyone on this call. There's a lot of volatility out there, right? That's not a political statement. That's just a reflection of changing times, changing leadership, changing values. And so, making sure that your organization is positioned for success no matter what happens by having contingency plans, right? So, for example, making sure that I think I actually saw this recommendation for for services professionals in the for-profit world, but I think there's some merit in it even for a nonprofit. And that was this newsletter that I got the other day was saying, in terms of your funding sources, make sure that you have no more than 15% of your funding from any single source. Now, for some people, that's simply not attainable, and I understand that. But the message behind it, I think, is valuable, which is that the more diversification you have in the types of funding you get from the funding sources, the better off you're going to be, right? We have a lot of folks right now who are moving into expansion of their fee-for-service arrangements, thinking about creative ways to leverage education, training, professional development as services that they could be paid to deliver that are still in full alignment with their organization's mission. So again, various things to consider here. But again, I would actually consider putting on paper, some scenarios, right? Like the best case scenario, the mid-range scenario, and like the worst case scenario, right? What would we do if this funding got pulled out from under us? Or what would we do if suddenly this partner of ours went away? Or conversely, what if we had this great opportunity? What are we willing to push pause on or reshuffle to take advantage of that opportunity, whether it's submitting a grant proposal or putting together a new, service arrangement? Just think about those opportunities, have those conversations, and have a plan in place. Again, I would not plan any more than a year ahead, and sometimes that's questionable, right? The technology is changing so fast, the marketplace is so volatile. I would just think this is not a strategic planning session either. This is simply contingency planning. I would workshop this yourself or with your team or with your board. I would have a great scenario, a mid-range scenario, and a worst case scenario as a starting point, and then envision like what would that worst case scenario look like, and what would we do to remain financially solvent to make sure that our clients are taken care of, and to make sure that we don't go crazy in the process, candidly. Okay, that's point number 4. And then finally, trend number 5. Um, Maybe you're already doing this, right? A lot of nonprofits are beginning to ask more explicitly for general support, right? People, infrastructure, technology services, overhead. Again, the days of just asking for programmatic dollars through grants, I think, are behind us. And there is growing recognition, according to this. This is a fundraising company, but they put together this annual report that I think it merits looking at, because it's talking about the fact that, look, more funders recognize that in order to do great programmatic work, nonprofits have to remain solvent, right? They have to have a staff. They have to have the lights on, right? They have to have maybe some capital infrastructure to be able to do the work that they do. And so, I know in the past, a lot of the clients we work with have been pretty gun shy about, like, number one, it's super hard to find unrestricted funding. Number two, asking for that seems like greedy, or it seems like, they're just going to shut us down right away. It seems like maybe that is thawing somewhat. So definitely keep an eye open for opportunities to not just get programmatic funding, but also find ways to keep your operation humming so that you are able to deliver the highest possible level of impact. All right. So I know I'm past time. I apologize. Thank you for bearing with me. A couple more quick things. So I promised you some webinar previews, and I'll do that in just a moment. First, I want you to think about what's one action you can take, 15 minutes or less, to make progress, right? Maybe it is, I'm going to reflect on these questions some more and really jot down some notes. Maybe one of the questions stood out to you and you're going to have a workshop with your board or with your team to really go through those questions at a deeper level and really unpack, where are people's heads at? Like, how are we feeling about this? Or it might just be, look, I'm going to take a look at these slides. I'm going to read a couple of these reports or scan them. Don't forget about Notebook LM from Google and Gemini. It's a great tool for taking a big document and getting a voiceover podcast generated by AI to help you really sort through the key points. Or run it through ChatGPT if you feel comfortable doing that. But think about what you're going to do, 15 minutes or less, to make progress. Just one step. That'll be a big move forward. All right. I'm going to voice over these webinar topics for you in just a moment. If you would be so kind as to go to this URL or scan this QR code and give me quick feedback on today's session. Was it helpful to you? Do you like the 30-minute format? And then there are a few other basic questions. I would be super grateful to you. So while you're doing that, let me just read you some of the topics that we have set up for next year. I will also drop these into the chat just for those of you who like to have those kinds of things. And I apologize, these are not beautifully formatted. But in January, we're going to talk about calm and strong, what the best nonprofits get right first. In March, AI red flags and green fields for nonprofits. Jumping ahead to the summertime, July, we'll have a mid-year checkpoint. We'll probably do something like this, where we're having some guided questions and discussion in the chat, and then some, trend spotting for the second half of the year. In October 2026, something that we see with a lot of clients is just mindset shifts, right? A lot of times we are, whether because of fear or past experience or the marketplace, we get into our heads a lot in a way that's unhelpful. And so in October, we're going to talk about 3 top confidence blockers in your nonprofit and how to overcome them. And then again, at the end of the year, we'll start thinking about long-term sustainability in your organization, not just growth for the sake of growth, but really making sure that you have a legacy that can carry on beyond you, beyond one year to the next, beyond paycheck to paycheck, etc. All right. So with that, that is today's session. I am so grateful to each of you for taking time out of your busy schedules. You really stuck with it through the whole thing. I'm super grateful for that. I wish you all a wonderful holiday season and a fantastic start to 2026. And if I can ever be a resource, please reach out. Nate at silvermaplestrategies.com would be more than happy to visit with you further, learn about your goals, and see if there are any other resources that we can provide that could be helpful to you. Take good care, everybody. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next year on our next webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.